Presiding Officer, last month, after years of Labour campaigning, ScotRail was brought into public ownership in what Nicola Sturgeon described as a historic moment. Can I ask the First Minister if making the biggest cuts to railways in over half a century was what she had in mind?
First Minister.
Well, Anas Sarwar says years of Labour campaigning. Of course, before that there was years of Labour government at Westminster that failed to bring the railways back into public ownership. And also opposed the devolution of Network Rail. But back on to, I think, the more serious issue. This is a temporary timetable. I wish it didn't have to be put in place. It has been put in place in consultation with Transport Focus to give greater certainty rather than have unplanned cancellations for a short, I hope, period of time that those revised services have to be in place. I've already set out in my answers the work that needs to be done, the developments we need to see, both on pay and on training more drivers, to ensure that as quickly as possible these services get back to normal. That's the focus of me, it's the focus of the Transport Minister, the Government and of ScotRail.
Anas Sarwar.
The Minister wants to talk about what was happening when I was at school, not what was happening in the 15 years she's been in government here in Scotland. The reality is there is no industrial action, and what she's talking about is relying on the goodwill of staff to work on their rest days to keep Scotland's railways going. So let's look at the facts and the reality facing Scotland's passengers. At the start of 2020, there were 2,400 services a day. In the timetable announced in February, approved by the Scottish Government, that number had reduced to 2,150, a cut of 250. Now, the new timetable announced yesterday by the Scottish Government, owned by ScotRail, that number has reduced to 1,456 services a day, a cut of almost 1,000 services compared to the start of 2020. At the same time, the Scottish Government announced an increase in rail fares in the midst of a cost-of-living crisis when fuel prices are spiralling. In 2018, Nicola Sturgeon described cancellations of up to 144 a day as unacceptable and cancellations of 40 a day as not good enough. She said, and I quote, "We expect, indeed we demand, better from the rail operator." Well, for once, Nicola Sturgeon has got nobody else to blame. Why are 40 cuts a day when someone else is in charge not good enough, but cutting 1,000 services a day, in the words of the Rail Minister, a stable and reliable service?
First Minister.
Well, of course, Anas Sarwar is possibly deliberately mixing up different things, and I'll come on to that in a second. But it is important. Firstly, as I believe the record will show, Presiding Officer, I haven't said there is industrial action. There haven't been ballots for industrial action, and I hope there is not industrial action. But there is a pay dispute. Yep. As Lev has said, it is in dispute with ScotRail, and drivers are therefore, some drivers are not accepting overtime, Sunday and rest day working. So that is a matter of fact. He is right to say, and I've said it several times already today, that we don't want ScotRail to be in a position of having to rely on rest day working. We came to an agreement, ScotRail came to an agreement with the rail unions last year, in October last year, to extend these arrangements until October this year. But there is a training programme underway to train new drivers to reduce the reliance on rest day working. It was interrupted because of COVID, but it is back underway, and there will be significant numbers of drivers coming through that training programme. Turning now to services, the change to services in February, yes, I know they are controversial, and I know members in this chamber have spoken out against them, but these were changes that were to take account of changes to travel patterns that have come about due to COVID and people's different ways of working. The services that we are talking about now are a temporary change, a temporary timetable until we get over, till ScotRail gets over this short-term challenge, and I've set out today the steps it needs to take, both around pay and negotiating with the unions a fair pay settlement, and also continuing that work to train more drivers. What has been announced is a temporary timetable, and I expect it to be temporary so that those services are back to normal as quickly as possible.
Anas Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, Scotland celebrated the railways coming into public ownership, something Labour championed and continued to support. But already, due to SNP incompetence, and I'll remind SNP members, repeatedly you voted against nationalisation of our railways. But already, due to SNP incompetence, 1,000 services cut a day, proposals to shut booking offices, rail fares up, a refuse to rule out compulsory redundancies and industrial relations at an all-time low. Yet again, the SNP chase the headline but won't do the work. Maybe they should employ fewer spin doctors and more train drivers. On the same weekend, the Nicola Sturgeon jetted over to the US to talk about climate change. The SNP Green government cut rail services, the greenest form of transport here at home. And while she rightly demands action on the cost of living across the UK, she ignores the impact of decisions she makes right here in Scotland. The cost of commuting going up, people struggling to get to work, unable to get home at night, and whole communities cut off from our cities. Why do the people of Scotland continually have to pay the price of SNP failure?
First Minister.
Chasing headlines, presiding officer. Could that be like, I don't know, perhaps saying in a council election that there'll be no coalitions and then doing backroom deals with the Tories after the council elections? Could that be what Anas Sarwar is talking about? How dare?
First Minister, there will be no conversations across aisles. No loud conversations. Thank you. First Minister.
Anas Sarwar come to this chamber and talk about the cost of living when his party is seeking to do backroom deals with the authors of that cost of living crisis. Secondly, presiding officer, it's one thing for Labour to say they have, let me quote, championed the renationalisation of ScotRail, supported the renationalisation of ScotRail. Unfortunately, they didn't do anything about it when they had the opportunity in government. So this government has renationalised ScotRail. Yes, there are challenges in that, and we are doing the work to address those challenges, both in the short term, in the way I have set out. People who use the railway across our country have a right to expect that, but we will continue to work with ScotRail to overcome these immediate challenges and then build that better railway for the future. That is what being in government is all about. And on previous performance, Anas Sarwar is still some considerable way from that.